hockey's an expensive sport, and too many parents get caught up in, you didn't play good in this tournament, and your effort wasn't great here or that, or you look tired one day, like all this. And they're like, you'll hear parents say, like, do you know how much money we spent to come here? That's not the kid's issue. Like, he has no say in that. Yeah, if I can teach him a couple things on the ice, that's great. But if I can get them smiling and having a bit of fun, like, I think that's way more important. But it is, pretty interesting how even at such a young age, you can see that some of them are holding pressure and stress. I refereed one game ever in my life. I was so excited. I went to the reffing school. I think I was 12 or 13. It was a game with 6-year-olds, and these two kids ran into each other. Neither of them had the puck. They hit each other hard, as fast as 6-year-olds can go. One coach comes out and he's just trying to help his player, and the other coach is coming out and he is screaming at him that there's a penalty, all this. And I'm sitting there, I'm a kid. It was one of the first things that went into my mind. I'm like, I'm never doing this again. Like, scary. Like, I have this grown man screaming at me. Like, I'm not gonna do that again.
Landon Ferraro has been around professional hockey and professional sports ever since he was born. But if his 34 years on this planet have convinced him of anything, it's that youth sports should not be a means to that end. Hey there, I'm Scott Rintoul, the host of Better Sports Parents. And before we get into this episode, I want to say a heartfelt thank you to all of you who have supported and encouraged me on whatever platform since we've gotten this podcast going. There seems to be a genuine appetite for this conversation. And while some of the comments and some of the stories have had contrary opinion to those that the guests on this podcast have offered, everyone seems to be in agreement that this is a much needed conversation. And it's only through that conversation that we improve the youth sports landscape. Now to Landon Ferraro, whose path is professional hockey. It's what he chose. He followed his heart. And it's hard to know whether his path would have been any harder or any easier had he chose something other than what his father did for a living. For those who don't know, Landon's dad is Ray Ferraro, who was on this podcast a couple of weeks ago. And Landon decided to go down that same hockey highway. He had a professional hockey career that lasted more than a decade through North America and in Europe. And while he didn't reach the heights of the NHL that he once dreamed of, it's a very impressive accomplishment, but one that came with comparison the whole way. What's more, Landon decided to go into broadcasting, something his father has also excelled at. So that comparison remains intact. But again, it's what his heart led him to do. Landon is a very unique guest on this podcast because he can offer a very different perspective on a similar situation, the one that Ray described in raising Landon, his brother Matt, and of course their brothers Riley and Reese. He offers a different lens on that entire situation. Landon is also a father of his own now, and while his son is not quite ready to head into youth sports, he knows what lies ahead as he's coached youth and continues to participate in youth sports in various capacities. He is now a Sportsnet analyst, as mentioned, on television, and he is a host of a podcast called 100% Canucks. There's a lot of hockey, a lot of sports, and a lot of laughs in this episode. So please enjoy Landon Ferraro. Thank you very much for doing this, Landon. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. And as I mentioned in the intro, you are Ray Ferraro's son, and that shouldn't come before your first name, but I imagine in many settings it often does. Let's just deal with the elephant in the room first and foremost. What are some of the benefits and drawbacks that you've experienced in both your hockey career and perhaps now as you start into your broadcasting career from being quote unquote Ray Ferraro's son?
I mean, I obviously I'm able to lean on him a lot of the time in both professions. The one I'm now done playing and now just starting out on the broadcast side. So I mean, obviously that's it's a big advantage to be able to, talk to someone that's been in the game, 40 years now, in both sides. So, I mean, it's always nice. Definitely growing up, it was something that I just me and my older brother especially had to get used to every time we walked into a rink or something like that. It was always, that's Ray Ferraro's son playing or something along those lines, right? So, it bugged me when I was young a little bit, and then I got over it, and then probably like junior time again, starting to hear all that. The biggest frustration out of it is just, having people tell me that I'm only at where I am because of him. And I wouldn't, I'm not going to say that I'm didn't get to places, in spite of him or anything like that. Like it was what it was, but at the same time, like I worked really hard. I put my time into to better my craft, and for a lot of years that's literally all I cared about and worked towards. Well, other kids that even on my teams that you'd hear other parents talking or something like that, that I only play on the power play because of my dad. It's like, well, I scored a lot of goals when I was a kid. But like those parents, like the kids would go to trips in the summertime and go do all these different go hang out with their friends on the weekend and stay out later and all that stuff, and I didn't. Like, not me and my family took family trips, but and got away from the game, but like that was my obsession. I worked really hard at it, and as I went along and along, it would turned into something that I just laugh at a ton, right? Like I'd be playing in the American League and doing well or something, and you'd still hear it. I'm like, yeah, a full organization is putting me on the bubble of the NHL because my dad, right? Like, yeah, he might have played with that person or their friends, but I also remember getting told I'm not good enough in the end of a training camp and you got to go down. And I earned a spot in the NHL, and then there wasn't another contract. Like, it is what it is. At the end of the day, it's a business and you gotta do it. My favorite, though, just to end it, is going over to Europe and playing in Germany and hearing some Germans kinda yell that stuff at me. I'm like, "Yeah, my dad loved me so much, he shipped me all the way to Germany." Right? Like, if he had some pull, I wouldn't be here. I'll tell you that right now.
That's great. And I know your dad well enough to know that you two probably laugh about those sorts of things now, but I also know the integrity that he has and that he wouldn't try to influence anything in that way. And you know that as well. It's not anything that you can control, it's not a choice you made. It's just the family that you were born into. There's a couple of things that strike me from your answer when you talk about that. One is the pressure. Did you ever feel that pressure because of the last name on your sweater?
Definitely. I think it was something that I felt externally more when I was younger and probably, like, just getting into junior, my first couple of years. Every conversation, especially when I first entered, was, "Your dad scored 108 goals, like, what are you gonna do?" And I'm like, "Not score 108 goals?" Like, I mean, like, it is what it is, but,
No one else has
I think
either,
as
so
I
don't
got
worry about it.
yeah, seriously. But I think as I got older, honestly, like, it was more internal pressure that it took me a while to, I mean, accept in some ways that I wasn't gonna have the career that he had, and still to be proud of what I've accomplished. And just because your dad was very good at something and you have all the help in the world growing up and that inside look, it can't make you a better player. It can help in certain aspects, but you are who you are and you have to make do and do the best you can. And it's something that, probably in the middle portion of my pro career was tough, as I couldn't crack full time. Then I finally did, and it only lasted a year. Then I was back in the American League. Like, it was a hard pill to swallow. And then as I got a little bit older, and you just, I guess, yeah, like, you accept it, and that's not meaning that you give up and you don't try and keep getting better and seeing how far you can take yourself, but it was something that I just had to get over. Like, I can't replicate everything he did perfectly, but, I could do the best that I could, and that ended up being enough eventually. Took a bit, but eventually.
The other thing that jumps out to me from your answer, Landon, is that you heard the other parents talk about it. And like it or not, that does have an influence on kids. You're a father now, and I know that your son is not at the age where he's gone into organized sports, but that's not that far away relatively. Have you thought about that at all? About how you'll conduct yourself as a parent, given how those parental comments may have influenced you or those around you?
Yeah, and it's funny though, like, when I was younger and, I say younger, but old enough to know what's going on, like, 12 and older, um, like, you'd hear some of those comments from parents and things like that, like, again, it's the typical, even now, like, I'm older, I have a wife, I have a son that's gonna be 2 in December, and the amount of conversations you have that you don't think they're listening, and then all of a sudden our 21-month-old repeats something, and you're like, "Oh, like, he's paying attention even when he's playing with his cars over there." Like, parents forget that kids hear a lot, and the interesting thing is, most of the time it was, like, some of my closest friends on the team, it was their parents complaining about stuff and hearing that, and sometimes you'd start to feel as the year went along that, one of your little buddies was, you guys were super tight, and as the year went along, he kinda pulls away a little bit, and then you don't understand, but I do now, but there was a lot that we'd stayed super close. I'm having sleepovers, they're coming over to my place, like, we're best buddies at 13 or whatever, and it's the parents' influence a lot of times that really shapes the way the kid's gonna think. So I think that's one of the most important things is, as much as you're trying to help your kid, and yeah, you can have all the belief in the world, but you don't need to put that on them. At the end of the day, the vast majority of us playing minor hockey are not gonna get even to the pro level, let alone the NHL. And that is totally okay, right? Like, you get into sports, like, you said, when my kid gets to that point, if hockey's the sport or whatever it might be, I just want them to have fun. I want them to learn how to work hard. I want them to start to build that resilience that you get from a sport of, okay, yeah, you tried really hard and it didn't work, that's okay, but is there things to learn from it? Like, just all those, like, that's what I want. If he ends up going far with it, great, if that's what he wants to do, but it's not a prerequisite for putting him in the sport at the age of 5.
Well, there's an obvious pathway for you into the sport of hockey, given everything that I've mentioned. And at that point, with you and Matt growing up, your older brother, at that point, you're watching your father on TV. So it's pretty easy to see that you want to emulate your dad, like a lot of kids want to do as well. What are some of your earliest sporting memories, not just hockey, but all sports, Landon?
Well, like, the first time I played on a team, was when my dad was with the Rangers, and at the practice rink, it's funny, like, I remember, like, 2 or 3 things from that time. Like, I was really young, but I remember being in my full gear, and at the practice rink, there was, like, the kid smaller rink up on the 2nd level, but you could see over down to the big ice, and being up there and being able to look over and see whether it was practice going on or, a lot of times it was one of the injured guys skating or whatever, and just looking down and, just having that clear, like, I'm up here, but I want to be down there. And, like, that was a dream right from the beginning. It wasn't, it's being a kid and being naive, but, like, I knew I was gonna play. I knew that I loved it. It was just inside me. But I loved soccer. I loved playing baseball. Terrible hitter. Decent in the field, but terrible hitter. That I had no chance going anywhere with that one. But no, like, I was a sport kid. Like, I loved anything that there was competition, that even if it was just against yourself. Like, I remember being at the rink and watching my brothers practice because every little brother gets pulled around to your older siblings' stuff, and especially at Kamenko Arena, in Trail in the summer, my brother would do a camp, and I had ants in my pants all the time, and, my dad would be trying to talk to a buddy that he hasn't seen in a while, and it would always turn into, "All right, how fast can you do a lap of the concourse?" So I'd rip around and he'd be like, 26 seconds. And before I knew it, I'd be doing 15 laps. And it's funny now with my kid, I'm like, there's not a chance he timed me once. Like, he's just throwing numbers out, just trying to buy a little bit of time. But yeah, like I said, like I was just a kid that loved to be active and loved to be especially around the rink, and getting to go into the dressing room with my dad and see how much fun those guys were having. Um, yeah, I mean, it was definitely something that he didn't have to talk me into, that's for sure.
One of the interesting things about interviewing you, having already spoken to your dad, is that I get two different perspectives on your upbringing and the approach to sports, both his and yours. What do you remember about not only Ray's approach, but your mom's approach to sports when you were a little guy?
Well, I mean, my mom was, obviously the one. My dad was on the road a ton, and she was having to lug us around everywhere. And I don't like, I actually can't think of, I can think of a couple times that she would give me some crap for as we were leaving the rink, and it was never because I didn't score or I didn't try or anything like that. It was, you hit someone from behind, that's not okay. Did that a couple times as you're first starting to hit, and you're just excited and you don't realize when people are gonna turn, and you go through them. And for her, it was always, like, have respect for the other players. And then because I watched my dad so much, he was, how do you say it? A little fiery on the ice, and no one likes to hear a teenager yell at a 22-year-old or a 65-year-old ref. So it was kind of those instances, not being smart on the ice or not being able to close my mouth. But from my dad's side, like, really, like, there was one rule, and it was work hard. And that, again, doesn't mean scoring goals or any of that. It was, me and your mom put a lot of time and effort into getting you to the rink. For him, especially during the season, it was, especially now that I've been through what playing is like and how the travel is, and just like mentally how exhausting a season is. And yet he'd get home at 3 in the morning and then drive us to school because he'd been gone for 10 days, and then pick us up and take us to practice. Like, it was a lot. And so, like, that was his one rule was, if we're putting the effort in to do this, you have to put the effort in on the ice. Past that, it is what it is, but that's the most important thing. And that's something that I'll definitely take with my kid when he gets to that point.
I think one of the things that many parents, and I will put my hand up here, that you struggle with at times is that if you've played or been around a higher level of sport, you feel like you have knowledge and wisdom to give your own kids in the sport that they happen to be pursuing. And I would think that's almost impossible for Ray not to have, given the level he was at and the sport that you happened to choose was his sport. What was your relationship with him like in that respect when it came to talking about the game and him being a resource, but also being dad?
Yeah, I mean, well, not only did I play the same sport, but I played the same position too. Just really tried to put it straight down the middle. No, like, his line to me that I heard so many times was, and I almost guarantee he said it to you, was, if I was a plumber or an electrician or a piano player, whatever the career was, like, I wouldn't be able to help you as much. But you're playing the same sport, the same position. He's like, it's literally all I've done with my life. Like, I have a decent idea, and he just wants to help. Just like, every parent, they just want to give the most information to your kids so that they have the best chance of succeeding in whatever aspect. Again, like as he was doing this, like he knew that I wanted to play in the NHL and I had big dreams and he wanted to help that, but also he's just wanting me to be happy with how I played and be proud of what I'm doing. And if he can help that along, like why wouldn't he do it? But there was, a couple of years of really trying to find that middle ground of me being too young to say that it was too much of hockey talk and all of that. And again, you're talking about pressure, like to me, until I got a little older, to realize, like telling him, like, hey, I don't want to talk about hockey right now. Like when I was younger, I felt like that would be letting him down and just not knowing how to communicate. And same for him down to me. But over a little bit of time, like you start to realize that if I just tell him, like, he's gonna be happier too, because now we've got a better relationship and we can talk about other things. And so for me, it was, kind of that like 14 to 16, like bantam, and then my first year in the dub that we just finally got to a point of, because I call him after every single game. I did it basically even when I was in Germany, calling after and talking about the game or whatever. But we got to a point where even though it was kind of unspoken, we just knew, like, until I bring up the game, we don't talk about it. Some days, especially as I got older, but, like, I knew I played terrible. Like, I knew that I had a bunch of turnovers and I missed chances. I snapped at a ref, whatever it would be. Like, I don't need to hear it. Like, I already know. And so we just would talk about how Reese and Riley are doing or what's going on in Vancouver and blah, 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 or a new movie that I saw, like anything else. And then I'd eventually get to a point of, all right, we can get into it a little bit. And I'd bring it up and then we get going in it. But it took time to find that balance because, again, like you said, like he just wants the best for me. He just wanted to help and he knew that he had a lot of knowledge to be able to do that. But I just needed him to be dad at points, and finding that switch was big for us, for sure.
Well, and he talked about this as well. So I know you haven't heard the interview that your dad and I did, but by the time this comes out, many people will have. And one of the things Ray talked about was one of the great gifts his dad gave to him. And maybe it's just because he didn't play hockey and didn't know, is that he never brought it up. He was always on Ray's terms when he was a kid to bring it up with his dad. And he said, I'm a little guilty of not doing that. But we got to a point, especially with Landon and I, where he would say, I got it, dad. And that was the signal that we didn't need to talk about it. You mentioned your brothers, Riley and Reese, who are separated from you and Matt by a bunch of years. Did you see a difference in the way that your dad interacted with them around sport compared to the way he interacted with you and Matt?
Definitely, it also helped that they played soccer. Um, so, I mean, I found it really amusing even when they were little, and playing for a few years, the amount that my dad would still just ask them about things, and not because he's telling them about it. Like, he's asking, "What is that setup?" Like, Riley's at Penn State now, and Reese is in grade 10 playing, here in Vancouver. But, like, Reese, ever since he was, like, little, he's built just like my dad. Like, their brain works the same in the sense of they see numbers, they see plays, players, teams, and they memorize it instantly. So you'd have this six-year-old walking my dad through, like, defensive formations, using his little soccer guys, showing everything off, like, it was pretty amusing to watch. But no, like, I think getting older and especially being out of the game way longer, um, like, my dad is a intense person. He goes at what he works at very hard and very pointed. And especially when he was playing, like, his drive, not that he doesn't have drive now, but it was, like, hyper focused. And at points, like, he couldn't just because of time, like, he couldn't handle things a certain way because he was and I get it, right? Like, it's summertime, you go to the gym in the morning, you go on the ice, you've just finished, like, you need a little time to decompress. During games, he was on a lot of bad teams. There wasn't a lot of happy nights towards the end of his career coming home from the rink, and, like, that intensity would come home because he's there, his body's there, but he's thinking about the rink and how they can fix things and all of this, like, he didn't have that with them, and he was able to enjoy it a bit more, I think. I think that he was able to understand because, like me and Matt were so much older that we were having these types of conversations essentially by the time Reese and Riley were born that, he's definitely learned things of like, oh, like I thought that was good, but you're telling me for these reasons probably could have handled that differently. Or you did do this great because, hey, look at that dad over there. Like that was crazy. But you see that that's not the right way. Like, I think he learned a bunch and was able to just be a bit more present because he was home way more and understand when to push, when not to push. Because a big thing in this conversation too, it's not like parents shouldn't be pushing their kids and trying to get them to push their own boundaries. Like, I think that's really important, but there's also that point where, all right, that's enough. Like, let's just have some fun. Like, let's play a board game. Let's do anything else, right?
Well, and it all depends who leads whom there. And that's something that Ray talked about with your younger brothers in Riley and Reese. They took he and Cammy to soccer, not the other way around. You pursued hockey because you loved it so much. I want to get into when you made that decision and why you made that decision, but I guess let's start with the when first. You talked about playing soccer and baseball and other sports. When did you decide, okay, I'm just going to focus on hockey and that's going to be my primary objective?
I think that was, it was when I was 10, when we first moved to Vancouver after my dad retired. I mean, in saying that I made the decision then, I don't think I ever made the decision. Like, it was just inevitable. Like, from the time I was a little kid, like, I loved soccer, like, loved playing. But not once, literally, I don't remember one memory that I was like, maybe I'll be a pro soccer player." Like, that I'm like, "No, no, like, this is a side gig." Even as a kid, I'm like, "This is just for fun over here." If there was ever a conflict between schedules, there wasn't a conflict because I always picked hockey. Like, it wasn't anything. So, I stopped playing baseball when I was, like, I think the year before 9, and as much as I liked playing as well, it was always tough because baseball would start, the season, like, the hockey season for my dad would end, we'd finish school, and then we'd go back to Trail, BC, and I would always miss the playoffs and, like, the end of the season, so I'm like, "Well, this just isn't even worth it." I'm doing all, like, the before stuff, I don't even get any of the fun. I remember our team won the league the one year when I think it was my last year when I was 9, and, I got the medal mailed to me, and I remember looking at it, I'm like, "Cool." Just chucked it to the side. I'm like, "I didn't win this." Like, I played third base and was, like, 1 for 5 every game. I don't think I really deserved this one. So that was an easier one, but when I moved to Vancouver, I just soccer was it was enough. I just knew that it wasn't for me anymore. Like, I wanted to be all in on hockey. We got to Vancouver, and it was a completely different animal than I'd ever been a part of. Like, I was coming from Atlanta minor hockey, right? Like, it's a bit of a bit of a different standard, and so getting here and seeing how, like, hyper focused people were on it and the amount of even at that time, like, skills coaching was just starting. We got linked up with John Calvano that, was my brother's first coach at Burnaby Winter Club. He coached a spring team of 1990 borns, and I'm a 91, but after, a little bit, he let me start coming out with that group, and that was my group growing up past that. But to have like, I'd never had a group of kids around me that loved hockey as much as I did. And, like like in Atlanta, it was like hockey was their side gig like soccer was for me. There was football or baseball were the 2 big ones down there. So, like, to have that many like-minded kids around me, like, it was heaven. But at the same time, like, it was intimidating. Like, I went from having the puck on my stick the entire game in Atlanta, me and Bob Corkham's kid, Kellen, that were playing on the team, and Connor Murphy was, on that team as well in Atlanta. Like, we did everything to I get here, and I'm like, "Oh, like, I actually gotta, like, work to get the puck, and I gotta be better so that the better players wanna play with me and not vice versa." Like, it took my competitiveness to a whole 'nother level.
In terms of multi-sport versus focusing early, because that sounds like a really young age to say, all right, I really want to push in. As a parent, what is your approach that you will take with your own son as far as exposure and multi-sport versus early sport specialization?
Oh, I definitely make sure he's playing something. Like, I was who was it on? It was Marty Fish, the tennis player, talking about with his kids, like, they have to do a team sport and an individual sport. And I really like that because it does train 2 completely different, especially mentally, like, how do you be in a group? How do you work together? How even when you're not best buddies with this kid, but you're on the ice together, like, how do you still care to get them involved in the play, to play with each other and be a real team? Like, how do you work in a group? Because that's something that, especially as you get older and you basically any type of business you get in, you gotta be able to work with people, especially the ones that you're not too fond of, right? Like, that's an important skill, but then on the individual sports side, like, having all that pressure on yourself. And not saying I want my kid to be, like, sitting there in a ball of stress by any means, but, like, you know how it is with a bunch of sports, it's not like, okay, you're on the golf course, like, I'm not saying that I need him to be hitting balls and, like, walking up the fairway, like, getting mad at his last shot, but, like, to have that little bit of competitiveness and knowing that it's on you, but while they're having fun and they don't really realize what they're building, like, that I think is a huge thing. When saying, like, I stopped playing other sports at 10, I stopped playing other sports, like, in an organized form, but when especially, at 10, 11, 12, like, I still went to Christina Lake every summer. I'd come back for random weeks to get on the ice to do skill stuff, but that was me really wanting to. It was never, "Hey, Landon, you're doing this." Like, with my buddies, especially with my group, like, I mean, I'm 34 now, like, me and my buddies still are kids, right? Like, all of us have kids now, but when we do get that guys' weekend to go play golf or something, like, we golf, we end up bringing a football and a soccer ball, and you're playing two touch, and, like, you do everything else, be creative because that doesn't get done a ton anymore, but, like, we would make up games all over the place when we were younger, and that's how I spent my other time, and that's something where you're still building different abilities in the athletic realm where you're not just focusing on skating, like, we're playing something as simple as with the frisbee, and we'd have 3 guys on one side and 3 on the other. You whip the frisbee down, and the other 3 are on a team, and you gotta keep hitting it up and see how many hits you can get, and then you have to catch it. So, you bump it twice and you catch it, you're up 2-0, and then you throw it back, like, that's coordination, that's being able to change on direction. Like, as dumb as that looks to everyone else at the park as these meatheads are running around tipping a frisbee, like, we're having a ton of fun, but without knowing it, like, we're working on stuff. I don't know, like, I think that's the right way to go about it. Have them playing as many sports as you can, and when they eventually don't wanna be fully committed to, 2 or 3 different sports, yeah, okay, you can go down to 1, but what are you doing in your free time? Like, I still go back in the backyard and kick a soccer ball and mess around. Like, it's fun to do other things and get your mind away from what you focus on.
Agree with you wholeheartedly. And you made so many great points there, especially when we talk about the concept of free play. And I am lockstep with you in the sense that we don't see enough of it anymore because there are so many more demands in youth sport from an organized perspective. We're going to have an extra ice time session this week. We're just talking hockey here because I know that's the parlance we're using, but it's in soccer, it's in hockey, it's in all of these sports that it's organized around everything. I am a firm believer that kids, youth, all of us learn so much more when it is creative. When you're making up those games, I would like to see sports organizations actively encourage that with their teams. And I don't know how we go about making that change other than one team at a time, Landon. But I think the benefits that kids derive from it, from a physical and mental standpoint, are substantial. And I think we could help stop some of the burnout we see in kids if we had more free play. Do you agree?
For sure. And I think the hard thing with hockey is like getting free ice. Like, it's a really tough thing to do. I was lucky being at Burnaby Winter Club, and we had the 2 small sheets in the other building, and, I mean, we had the ringette, rink in there. I don't know if I ever saw anyone playing ringette on it, or sorry, not ringette, the curling ice. I don't know if I ever saw curlers out there. Us kids would be out throwing the rocks back and forth, banging them everywhere, but again, like, that was we were lucky to have that free ice. My brother would be practicing and because I had practiced before him, and instead of going and taking my gear off, I just did an hour practice and I'd walk over to the other rink, and whether it was go work on my shot or stick handling, or there's just a bunch of other kids in there, and before you know it, I'm in full gear throwing a curling rock down the ice. Like you were talking about, like, it was just fun, nothing structured. It was also a place where you could try different things, like, you know, at at the age I'm talking about, like, that was still the age of, like, you don't overstick handle, you don't have that much creativity, like, you've played any structure, and this is the way that you play hockey. I feel like I'm a '91 born, I feel like my age was kind of like the tipping point of this is how we do it. And then our age went by, and all of a sudden, the skills coaches and the creativity was as much as the coach before would say, you got to have creativity on the ice, but then you stray a little bit out of the system and you'd get in trouble for it. You watch kids now and it's like, okay, here's the general structure, just go. Like, do all the crazy moves you want and throw passes all over the place. Like, it's more trial and error, but we did that on free ice, and I could try throwing a behind the back pass all the way across the ice if I wanted to. And then it would get picked off, and without having a coach tell me, it would be me going like, "Uh, maybe if I just took another step and fired it hard on my forehand, that play would have got there. It wouldn't have been as cool, but, well, we scored, so what's the difference?" Like, you start to figure things out on your own and what your limits as a player are as well with your ability, and always pushing it and trying to you see a buddy do something really cool, and all of a sudden you're like, "Oh, I can do that." Like, if he can do it, and, like, then you try it. Like, just all those little things, like, I think that's really important, but again, with hockey, like, it's ice time's just getting harder and more expensive to get, and that, like you said, again, like, that's kind of gone. Unless you're part of a club, like, it's really tough to do. But I totally agree, like, the free play part is more important in a lot of ways than a structured practice.
I think from an observation point for a parent, it's really important as well. And I don't think all of us, or maybe most of us, take that into account. When you're part of an organized team, there are mandated practices, mandated game times, and there's structure built into that. But when children have time to themselves, in your case, that free time at the rink, and that's what you would go work on, it doesn't always have to be in that frozen pond setting. It can be organizing a ball hockey game with the neighborhood kids, or going across to the neighborhood school and shooting baskets, whatever it happens to be. I think it's a really important indicator for parents to watch how their children choose to use their time when it's free, and then follow them in those directions, because they are literally showing you what they want to do when they have the choice. Ray said that it was very obvious from an early age that hockey was that for you. What was it about the sport that made you say, I can't get enough, I want more?
I know this might sound kind of dumb or cheesy, but even from like a really young age, like early memories, I just remember like how much fun my dad had at the rink. And again, I was really lucky to be able to be in those dressing rooms in LA, Atlanta, especially, in those two spots. But like seeing the guys interact and how much they, probably saw too much and heard too much, but at the same time, like getting to see them interact with each other and, kind of poke fun at each other, yet everyone's smiling and like having a good time. But then it was work time and it was serious and they cared. Like being around that environment, I just knew I'm like, I already liked playing this game, but like, all these old guys, they're 30, but like all these old guys are smiling and having a blast. And even at that age, I could see like my friends' dads that, just had normal 9 to 5s. And yeah, some of them really liked their job, but there was a lot of them that were like, I got to go to work. I'm like, I don't want that. Like, I want this. And for me, just again, being exposed to that, and more importantly, not being pushed, but being encouraged was probably the biggest thing, right? Like, you said it, like your kids will tell you what they want to do, or not tell you, but show you. And it's funny, like, again, my kids barely, not even two yet, but seeing my older brother Matt with his two kids, Enzo's his boy 9 and Arya's 7. And the amount of, I'll give him a call like, "Hey, what are you up to?" And he's like, "I'm going to take Enzo to this or that." And one might be hockey, one might be a robotics course, or whatever it is. Not I'm terrible at that stuff. Enzo is way more advanced than I am. But like just seeing how anything that they bring up, like show just a little bit of interest in, my brother and his wife do a really good job of giving them an opportunity to go learn more about it. They might do it once and they're sitting there and they're like, "This kinda sucks. Like, why did you bring me here?" But a lot of times, like, it sparks more interest out of them, and before you know it, Enzo's telling me about an animal or a machine or a hockey player. Like, he's all over the map, but, like, for a little a little guy, like, he's got a pretty good base of different understandings, and I think that's really cool. And that's something like I definitely, will try and do with my kid is just anything he shows interest in, give him the opportunity to learn more because if it's robotics, I'm not going to help him. Like unless it's take the batteries out, turn them and put it back in, like I'm kind of done. So like, give him an opportunity to learn from someone that actually knows what they're doing. And, maybe before you know it, he's especially the way the world's going, he's doing programming or whatever it may be. But like I think that's really important. Like just follow more. Like of course you gotta push a little bit at different points, but there's no point in having your kid doing a million different things and they only like 3 of them. And the rest seems like a job. They're gonna have more than enough time when they're older to have a job. Like, let them be a kid while they're a kid.
Very well said. And I do think that's an important reminder to coaches as well, because I believe you can see when kids are having fun or when they feel like you just have to be there. And you've done a little bit of coaching. You haven't been out of the game so long that you've had a chance to do a lot of it, but I know you have coached some youth. Do you believe the same thing? And is it constantly in your mind when you're on the ice, in your case, working with young kids or with teenagers, that you can see whether or not they're actually enjoying it or whether they feel like they have to be there?
you spot it while they're walking onto the ice. Like, it's the way they carry themselves, and it's funny, like, this past summer, I was, doing skill work, coaching from I think our youngest group that we'd work with were U8s, so 7-year-olds all the way up to dub, college, and, first couple year pro guys, and it's the same all the way through. Like, you can see it as the kids coming to the ice. The ones that are, "Hey, coach. Hey, how's it going?" Like, they're bubbly and you can tell that they've bugged their parents the entire way to the rink because they're so excited to get on the ice. And then you have the others that they're walking by, their heads kinda hanging, and you're the one to, like, "Hey, Jimmy, how's it going?" And they're like, "Good." And they just kinda keep going. You're like, "All right, so we're gonna have to put a little more effort into Jimmy because he clearly either is not having a good day or he just doesn't really wanna be here." And, with those, especially with the younger kids, obviously, like, yeah, if I can teach them a couple things on the ice, that's great. But if I can get them smiling and having a bit of fun, like, I think that's way more important. But it is, pretty interesting how even at such a young age, you can see that some of them are holding pressure and stress of, "Oh, like, I've missed 5 shots in a row," as we're using the lighter pucks, the normal weight ones and the heavy ones, because the kids like using the different colors. So, I already got them for the older guys, might as well use them for them. And, they might miss a couple, or especially with the heavy puck, they can't raise it because it's heavy. And, like, you can see them getting, like, angry. And, you try and explain to them, I'm like, "Hey, like, I played a long time, and you know how many times I missed the net? Like, way more than I put it in. Like, you're doing just fine. Like, you just gotta keep working at it." And some of those kids will right away lighten up, and that feels good. Like, you're helping them build a little bit of confidence and know that it's okay not to be perfect right from the get-go. But then there's some kids that you can see that whatever it is inside them, whether it's pressure from their parents or they don't enjoy the game, or they're just literally there's something's going on at school or whatever else is going on in life, like, they can't get themselves out of it. And I think that's the biggest part of coaching little kids is who cares if they can make the saucer pass or they can get through the drill, like, get them having fun, get them to lighten up and enjoy what they're doing, whether they enjoy the game or not. You're out here with a bunch of kids your age. Talk. Like, have fun, it's okay. Not everything needs to be so structured, and I like having points, and especially early in the practice of, "Okay, this is what we're doing." Generally start with a game and just try and get them moving and to lighten up a little of like, "Hey, like, we're not here to work. Like, that's not what we're doing." And it's crazy how many parents you'll hear like, "All right, time to go to work," as their kids, and they're making a joke, and it goes back to what we were talking before of like kids listen, but they hear things different than what you mean them. I mean, I've so many conversations with people my own age that we leave and I think everything's good, and then I realize later as I talk to the guy, they're like, "Yeah, you weren't very nice when we were talking." I'm like, I wasn't doing anything, like, my tone, or I made a joke and they didn't understand that it was a joke. Like, that happens especially with kids, right? Like, "Yeah, it's time to go to work." Well, now all of a sudden they're like, "Okay, like, I gotta really focus and do all this." Like, no, that's not what you're doing. Like, it's time to go have fun. And if you fall 15 times, good. Like, I tell the kids all the time, like, I don't want you to do the drill perfect. Because if you're doing the drill perfect, you're not trying to push to get better. And, I want to see if we're working on tight turns or whatever it is. Like, I want to see you fall. That means you're pushing yourself, trying to find your limit on the ice. And, maybe within a few times with a bit of help, you're making that tight turn and you can get skating faster. And when you can get that through their head and to where we're not like, your buddies aren't gonna laugh at you, and if they laugh at you because you fell, it's because they know, like, "Oh, thank God, because now when I fall, it's not as big of a deal." Like, you're in it together, and that's part of the fun being with a group is, like, having that acceptance and when you do mess up, yeah, they might laugh at you a bit, but it's because they're nervous themselves. And you kind of build that up, and then you can see the kid, he falls the first time, he falls the second, and then he figures it out the third time, and you could see their face light up a bit, and you're like, "All right, like, I didn't really wanna come out to, just, put my skates on and skate today and do the coaching, like, maybe I'm busy, I got stuff, I'm tired, my kid hasn't been sleeping," and then you see that kid figure it out and light up, and you're like, "All right, like, that was worth it."
You mentioned an unintended consequence from parents out of a good nature that maybe goes the wrong way. Good intention, but unintended consequence was something like, okay, time to go to work. And you don't really realize the weight of your words. One of the things I also wonder about is because we're living in this time where we want to be around our kids and we have such an emotional connection around sports that we want to see them play. I wonder if we're around a little bit too much. And I'm not talking about, forgetting to ensure that your child's in a safe environment. That's very important. But once you've established that, I do think there is a lot to be said for not being at the rink, especially during practices or at the field or at the gym, and letting them have that time to themselves for a lot of different reasons. From the bit of coaching you've done, Landon, in general, and I know this doesn't speak for every sport or every environment, are parents around a little bit too much in that regard?
I'd say so. I again, just with myself, like, when I was way younger and, my dad was playing and he's traveling a ton, my mom's taking us everywhere to all the games, and he didn't get to see a lot of games. That when he was in town, just having that presence there was like, "Okay, I gotta be good today." Right? Like, just like any kid, you wanna make your parents proud, and when you get off the ice to hear, "Hey, good job." Like all of that. But a lot of times, especially again as we got a bit older or whatever, but it was more, you drive to the rink, you get dropped off, you need any help with anything? No, I'm good. I go in and, especially at Burnaby Winter Club, there was the restaurant bar up top of the small rink where we always practiced. And all the dads especially would go up there during practice and none of us could really see. And that's a nice thing because yeah, they're probably watching and commenting on whatever's happening, but we couldn't see it. And, my mom would come to practice, she'd bring a book because, we lived decently far away from Burnaby. She's not dropping me off and leaving and coming back, but she'd bring a book and if you're a kid, you're always going to check to see if your parents watching. And I'd look up there and she's reading. And then next time I look, she might be looking for a second. She'd give a little wave and then go back to her book, right? Like not having that pressure, but you see it so much of even in summer skates of parents like so overly involved. And again, it comes from a place of they just want their kid to do well. But a lot of the time, like the kid doesn't care. They're out there having fun. Like you can see it and just talking to them as well. Like, like you talk to one kid and you're like, he's 10 or 12 or 13. And you're like, "Oh, what'd you get up to this weekend?" And he tells you some story about whatever he did, and you're like, "I would have had no idea that you're interested in that." And the way that he talked about that was the way I talked about hockey. And you're like, "That's what he wants to do. He's doing this because he has fun with his buddies," or in some cases, it's, "My parent really wants me to play." And, the amount of time and effort that gets put into and money that gets put into sports. And, my dad said this before, and I'm sure he said it while he was talking, but I think it's so true of just because you put the financial part of it in doesn't mean that your kid owes you anything. And that's the biggest disconnect I think they owe you effort, but at the same time, like, you gotta be realistic and be truthful with your kid and how you look at them in the sense of, "Okay, yeah, my kid likes hockey. He doesn't love it. He's never in the backyard picking up a stick and working on his shot," or he's got a bunch of different interests, like, if it's that much of a big deal to go so far in financially and you can see that your kid's not putting in the extra effort all over the place, he's not the one asking you to do another camp or when's the next time I'm on the ice. It's always, hey, you got practice tomorrow night, and you can see the kid like, oh, okay. Like that's the wrong situation. That goes back to what we were talking earlier of like listen to your kid and hear what their interests are, go pursue that. And by pursue it, I mean just giving them the opportunity to learn more about it. Hockey's an expensive sport, and too many parents get caught up in you didn't play good in this tournament, and your effort wasn't great here or that, or you look tired one day, like all this, and they're like, you'll hear parents say like, do you know how much money we spent to come here? Like that's not the kid's issue. Like he has no say in that. He doesn't know what $100 or $10,000 is. One's a bigger amount, but, like, what is that? Right? Like, I mean, to be honest, like, I signed my first I know I'm kinda jumping over around, but, like, I signed my first contract when I was just turned 19 playing in Everett. Like, it was a decent amount of money by a lot of standards, and I made good money all the way till I was 32. I had to learn what $100 was, because I'd always had a steady paycheck. I knew I got my 13 paychecks a year. I had my contract for the next year. I just yeah, the money just shows up in my account. I play hockey. I retire and all of a sudden live in Vancouver, not a cheap place, and I definitely didn't sign that Kaprizov contract for 136 million. So I need to work. I need to find what my next thing is. And I started coaching and doing that stuff because I didn't really know what else to do, and I do like working with kids, so I'm like, "Oh, that's a good way." And you're like, "Okay, well, am I gonna drive all the way out there for $100?" Like, "Ah, it's not worth it." And again, I'm not trying to say that as like, I'm so out of touch, but I was a bit, because from such a young age, I didn't learn what $100 was and how hard it is to make that and then do it again and again and start building. Like, I was 32. You think a 10-year-old's gonna understand that? Like, not a chance. So, just because you paid to come do this, yeah, your kid has to respect that and try and explain to them that what it means, but that doesn't mean to put pressure on them or get mad at them if they didn't perform. They're doing the best they can. And at the end of the day, like, if my kid wants to play hockey and I'm paying all the money to do it, all I care about is that he enjoys it and he puts effort into it. Past that, I have to be okay with I might spend a lot of money, and at the age of 16, he goes, "I don't wanna do this anymore." Alright, what are you gonna do? Like, you're not gonna not do anything, so what's you're stopping this for what reason? Like, just figuring it out that way, but again, it's not on him the amount that I put into it. And I can't expect just because I'm putting all my effort into him and his career that he's gonna repay that in being successful as a hockey player. Like, I just want him to have the best childhood and make sure that he has every opportunity that he wants, not what I want.
It's amazing, and I know we're talking about a vocation as opposed to a sport that's supposed to be fun, but with the amount of criticism that sometimes gets levied about a poor performance or a bad practice, it's pretty easy for us to forget how often we don't have great days at work. And thank goodness nobody's watching, because that one was a total throwaway. Just while we're on coaching here, I want to have you answer this before we wrap up. I had someone who's a high level contact in Canadian hockey recently tell me that we're losing coaches and volunteers, and a lot of the issues have to do with parents. And I think it is that sort of chaotic environment that you talked about with the investment and the time and the always around and maybe not a clear understanding of what's supposed to be being accomplished here. Landon, I'm just wondering from your perspective as somebody who's been involved with youth coaching recently, how do we create a better understanding between coaches and parents so that everyone is on the same page with what the objective and the purpose of what we're doing here is?
Distance, like really, really limit the amount and topics that parents and coaches can converse about. It all comes from wanting the best for your kid. But at the end of the day, if you're not the coach, especially in youth sports, a lot of times, we're in Canada. For the most part, everyone played hockey. So they think they understand it. They think that, they know best. Well, if you're that dead on and so good at it, you coach. You don't want to put the time in, or you can't because of your other job, like your actual job or any of that. Like, you have to let the coach coach. And I know this for a fact. This frustrated my dad more than anything because, and I got to give him a lot of credit. Like, my coach in Bantam was John Batchelor. Awesome guy. He did coach forever at the Burnaby Winter Club. And again, like we were talking before, like I was kind of on that tipping point of no creativity and all the creativity in the world. And John was definitely on the former side of, like, we're playing very structured hockey at the age of 13. And my dad would be in the car and we're talking about the game or whatever and he's like, "Why were you skating backwards in the neutral zone as the play's coming out? Like, why aren't you just going and attacking?" I'm like, "Well, John wants us to play this forecheck." And I could see it in his face of like, I wanna say 7 different things right now. But he'd bite his tongue and he's like, "Alright, like, if that's what the coach wants you to do, like, do it." But, maybe if there's an opportunity, just talk to him about, "Hey, like, when this is happening, like, in this play, would it be okay if I go and do this? Because I think I could go get the puck for us, or I could go do this." He's like, "There's nothing wrong with having that discussion, but it's also a couple things are happening. 1, he's not saying the coach is wrong. 2, he's now empowering me to go and have that conversation, not my dad having that conversation with him, right? Like, that's good for me to learn that even with a superior, like, you can have suggestions, you can go have a conversation. They might say no, and that's okay too, but you gotta be able to not stand up for yourself, but feel confident enough and comfortable enough that you can go have that conversation. And things have changed so much that that open door is there even at the NHL level now, that they understand that, like, you got to have your players be a part of it. But on the parent side, you can't fight all your kids' battles for them. I think a lot of times the thing that the parent is upset about or, not happy about, wants to see change, the kid hasn't even complained about it, right? Like, they're happy. They're having fun, they're playing, they won. Yeah, maybe you didn't get on the power play, but you had your part and you did your thing. Like, now again, like, that's just you putting more stress on your kid of like, well, maybe I should be on the power play. Like, why aren't I? And all of a sudden now they're in their head of, it's crazy how fast a kid can go from having fun to, I'm terrible. And you hear them say it out loud, like, I suck. You're like, don't want to have that, right? That's not the point of youth sports. But I think you have to respect boundaries at the end of the day. Like, parents need to understand that you can't yell from the sideline, you can't yell from the stands at the coach, at the referee. Again, like, you can see it at youth sport games, like, parents start yelling, then all of a sudden, the kids start yelling, and it's just they're watching, they're like, "Well, I'm supposed to be learning from them, they're yelling, I'm gonna yell." And now the whole sideline's a frenzy. And then there's some poor 16-year-old ref that's sitting there thinking about, like, well, here's the story. I refereed 1 game ever in my life. I was so excited, I went to the reffing school, I think I was 12 or 13, and got the full uniform, had a full week of scheduled games. I'm like, "I'm gonna, make $20 a game, like, this is gonna be awesome." It was a game with 6-year-olds, and these 2 kids ran into each other. Neither of them had the puck. I had one coach that, they both came out because they went in, they hit each other hard as fast as, 6-year-olds can go. The one kid or the one coach comes out and he's just trying to help his player. And the other coach is coming out and he is screaming at me that there's a penalty, all this. And I'm sitting there, I'm a kid. And it was one of the first things that went into my mind. I'm like, I'm never doing this again. Like, scary. Like, I have this grown man screaming at me. Like, I'm not gonna do that again. And the rest of the game, being the kid that I was, I think his team got quite a few penalties, and he kept yelling at me, and I eventually one of the other coach, like, called me over and he's like, "You're doing fine, and I'm telling you," because again, this is so like, it's not a travel team. He's like, "I know him very well." He's like, "If he says anything else, just tell him to leave, and I'll help make sure that happens." Like, he had my back, and that made me feel like, "Okay, like, I'm not in this alone," but like, that happens all the way through. I was terrible for it, even at the end of my career. Let my emotions get the best of me, and I would give it to the ref. And I'd feel like a complete idiot after, especially after the game, because 'cause I'm sitting there, I'm like, "The guy's just trying to do his job." Like, he's not trying to make the wrong choice. I wish I would have been way better at that as I was playing, but you gotta learn to just let go. There's so much emphasis on winning in minor hockey that who cares? It's great. Yeah, you try and be the best that you can, and you try and have your team be the best that they can, and hopefully they can win a tournament or go to provincials and do all that. I won 1 tournament from the age of 10 till I went to junior because North Shore Winter Club killed us everywhere we went. But I won 1 tournament, Medicine Hat, and I still got drafted. I still got to play in the NHL and go into an Olympic team. Like, all of that happens. No one cares if you've won 12 championships when you're 7 to 8 and 9, 10 years old. Like, what does it matter? The whole purpose is trying to grow the love of the game in the kid, get their skills to be the best that they want it to be, not what you see in them or any of that, but like helping them reach to the point they want to and push as hard as they want to. I think that's way more important. And I think that's part of one of the bigger issues in youth sports, not just hockey now, is it's so important to be on the best team. It's so important to be on the team that wins. I'll use Curtis McKenzie. I don't know if you know that name, but he played in Dallas for a bunch of years. Um, he was from Golden, BC, and he moved in with his grandparents in Burnaby to come play at Burnaby Winter Club because he wanted to play better hockey. Great. BC hockey got a complaint and they suspended him for the whole season. They suspended a 13-year-old kid because he moved in with his grandparents. He didn't play the whole year. They let him play on the lower team, and then he could practice with our team, but never could play. He ended up playing the most NHL games. He's still playing. He lost to Abbotsford, in the Calder Cup playoffs last year. Like, he's had the best career out of anyone that was on my teams, and he didn't play for a whole year. Like, it just shows, like, if you have the love, you have the effort, and you're good enough, you'll make it. If you don't and you have all the effort, all the whatever, all the time put in, but, like, it's just not there, well, that's what it is. Like, and that's the same for me, like, I had dreams of being a 10-year NHL guy, winning a Stanley Cup and doing all these things. I couldn't do it. I got games, I was good enough to be that bubble guy, ran into injuries that were just meant to be, and I didn't get more games, and I ended up in Europe. That's still pretty cool, right? Like, there's still good things that happen, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing.
Landon, a number of great points in a conversation full of them. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your perspective here in what is a very unique conversation, given your dad and Cammy and you that have all contributed to this. You're pretty good at this. I think you should maybe consider a career in broadcasting. Thank you very much for doing this, Landon.
Yeah, no worries, thanks.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Better Sports Parents and that you found some tangible takeaways that can help you in your journey to becoming a better sports parent. The best way you can support this podcast is by subscribing, following, reviewing, and sending us great comments on whichever platform you're watching or listening. If you'd like to send an email, the email address is feedback@bettersportsparents.com. And we'd like to grow this as quickly as possible, so we would kindly ask that you share it with your respective networks and with the other parents that you see at your children's sporting events. Better Sports Parents is a production of Toolkit Content, and the music on this podcast is provided by Lightstock Music and Andre Diaconou. Until next time, happy sports parenting. And remember, have fun. That's what it's supposed to be about.